Welcome to the Science Department Strategy for Success presentation for the class of 2021. I'd like to talk about ways that we can support your child in science. My name's Mr. Raw and my email is on the slide if you need it. The current curriculum in science in year 11 is arranged so that we have one set of students working towards a separate science qualification. They will gain 3 GCSEs, one from each of biology, chemistry and physics, and those will range from grade 1 to grade 9. The remaining students are working towards combined science qualifications. They will obtain 2 GCSEs ranging from grade 1-1 all the way to grade 9-9. All students in science will study core content across biology, chemistry and physics, with separate science students studying additional content in each of the core areas. In terms of assessments that are conducted in science in year 11, all students in class will complete end-of-unit assessments that are graded from 1 to 9 and that cover all assessment criteria in the completed units. They will also contain compulsory practical work and questions that cover that content. At the end of year 11, combined science students will complete 6 papers, 2 from each of biology, chemistry and physics. Each of those papers are 70 marks and are an hour and a quarter long. For separate science students, to allow for the additional content, they will also complete 6 papers, 2 from each of biology, chemistry and physics, but they will be 1 hour and 45 minutes and will be worth 100 marks. Each of those papers will contain approximately 75% assessment of content and 25% of assessment of practical work. Within that, there is also additional assessment of mathematical skills, for example, graph drawing and interpreting data, and for physics, the use of equations and performing calculations. In terms of strategies to support your child's learning in science, we would recommend some key areas. We will be starting to use knowledge organisers in lessons that will help to support learning. I would recommend that your child asks questions and doesn't be afraid to do that, as that's how most progress is made. Once your child has their revision guide, we would recommend that they bring those along to lessons because they can be used as an additional aid. And then the last thing I would definitely recommend is to not put limits on your learning. The worst thing you can do is to say that you can't do better than where you're at right now. In terms of strategies to improve the retention of knowledge in science, we would recommend 4 areas. In terms of the current memory model for learning, there are 2 things that are really important. The first one is rehearsal and the second is retrieval of knowledge. In terms of rehearsal, one of the most basic techniques that can be used, and probably one of the most effective, is the same technique that would be used to learn spellings in primary school, and that is to look at something, cover it, try and write down what you've seen, and then check your work. It's a simple way of assessing whether you know something, and it's a nice way of rehearsing it. The second way, which is a bit more up to date, is to use the programs and the assessments that are on GCSE Pod to have that practice and exposure to that knowledge. To run alongside that, then, you need to be practicing to retrieve that knowledge. You may have that in your memory, but to be able to retrieve it is something that needs practice as well. Quizzing practice is something that we're working on in science, and those quizzes are regular. But in terms of being able to do that at home, we will be sending home some packs of quiz cards that you can use at home to test your recall of the basic scientific knowledge that you need for your exams. In terms of studying effectively in science, the first thing I would recommend is to have a plan. So put aside time not only for science but for your other subjects so that you know what you're studying and when you're studying it. The second thing would be to test yourself. Identify the areas that you're weaker in and then use that to direct your revision. And then finally, once your knowledge is up to speed, to start practicing papers, to start putting that knowledge into practice and familiarising yourself with how the exam board asks its questions. In terms of links to study resources, you can see some of those here on the PowerPoint. If we start off with practice papers, there are links there to all of the different past papers that are available. Just be careful that if you're studying combined science, you need to follow that link, whereas separate sciences, you need to follow each of the separate links. Some of the YouTube revision videos that have come up quite a lot that students like are there as well, including a link to some videos of the required practicals. Some students may not get the opportunity to do them. They may have to be demonstrated to them. So to watch those videos will help you to upskill on those practicals into preparation for your exams. And then the last thing are some really good revision sites that contain revision resources, notes and tutorials. There's also links to some simulation sites, so that will allow you to simulate some of the practicals that you've done in lessons that you may not get a chance to repeat. And some links to some really good chemistry, biology and physics revision sites. Last but not least, some words of wisdom. Top of the list, I would definitely put knowledge as the most important thing. The more you know, the better you will do in time for the exams. The second thing, don't drop the ball with your math skills. They're really important for the exams. The better you are with basic math skills, then the better you will perform in your science exams. Memorise the key practicals. Make sure you know them like the back of your hand. You will be asked questions that are not necessarily about the practical that you did, but maybe a variation of it. If you know the practical that you did in lessons, you can apply that to the question and earn more marks. Next, I would say a little and often, just so that you don't lose interest in what you're doing. Little 15-20 minute revision sessions will be more effective than 2 and 3 hour revision sessions where you start to drop off and lose interest. And lastly, and this is probably the most important one, it's quite a common trap that students fall into, doing the easiest thing, which is revisiting and revising things that they're comfortable with and familiar with and they already know, when in fact they should be revising what they don't know and taking the more difficult path to identify those weaker areas and push themselves to make sure that they've filled those knowledge gaps in. Thank you.